Saturday, 6 p.m. Watching my mother carry a plate piled high with toasted sandwiches into the lounge room makes my father and I laugh. There must be 20 sandwiches stacked one on top of the other. My mother is a sandwich artist. In fact, my father and I are so excited by the stack of sandwiches, we take a photo of it. Oh, I love it when my father is playful like this. His eyes water and he dabs his cheeks with a big white hanky. If I hug him when he's in this teddy bear mood, it provides a direct link to my childhood. While the mood is so jovial, I mention the cake, and the jolly mood instantly changes to antagonistic. Everyone has a keg at her 21st, I say. Well, you're not, my mother says. It's natural to have a keg, I say. We're having an unnatural 21st then. Why can't I have a keg? It attracts hoodlums. Too late anyway. It's been ordered, I say. Who ordered it? Nev. Nev? Coral's boarder. Well, unorder it. If you've only got 20 people coming, says my father. 30, I say. They're more trouble than they're worth, says my dad. Just tell him you don't want it and be done with it, my mother says with an air of finality. When people go to a lot of trouble, you can't say, "Oh, don't worry about it," I say. "I'll talk to him," says my mother. No. To be honest, I don't really care whether I have a keg or not, but since I'm more or less 21, I've got to practice being independent at some stage of my life, so why not now? 10 p.m. I'm glad I staked out the Vienna first because now I feel familiar with it. I know what to wear, what time I should go in and so on. I decide on what I wore the other night while staking out the Businessman's Club, lemon shirt, tan slacks, Julius Marlowe shoes. The only addition to my wardrobe is a sloppy Joe to keep my hands occupied. Unoccupied hands drain the confidence. I also slip a piece of cardboard into my pocket, so I've got something to hold on to in case I get cold and need to put my sloppy Joe on. 11:45 p.m. The door that disappeared to nowhere yesterday leads to a wooden door at the top of some stairs today. I climb the smelly steps and press the greasy doorbell beside the heavy wooden door. It feels as though I could sit a 3-unit English paper in the time it takes for the slit in the door to open. A set of black eyes with an eyebrow looks at me. Then the slit snaps shut and the door opens. A wave of cigarette smoke rushes out and surrounds my body. The bass chatter of tipsy men follows, reverberating through my rib cage like marbles falling down a set of concrete stairs. The eyes and eyebrow belong to a face which appears as if it's been trapped in a bus door since birth. It has less expression than a budgie. Nevertheless, I get the all clear and step inside. The Vienna restaurant is a large smoky room. From its raised foyer, you see a bar with a mirror, 2 roulette tables, 2 blackjack tables, and 4 scantily clad waitresses carrying trays of drinks. Large crowds of men surround both roulette tables. The men closest to the tables focus on tiny silver balls, clicking and popping their way around the ornate wooden wheels. Men on the perimeter glance around the room, using little bird-like eye movements they think are subtle, but to an experienced observer they seem suspicious. Inside an alcove in the western wall, there's a window with bars where you change cash into betting chips. The person inside the wall, converting the money, is dressed like a frontier barber in an amateur musical. A waitress offers me an inky-looking beverage from a silver tray, but before she hands it over, she asks to see my betting chips. I don't have any, so she puts the drink back on the tray and says, "Free drinks if you're betting." To appear less conspicuous, I visit the frontier barber, hand over a $10 note, and receive 10 pink discs. They look like lollies, taste like wood. But the moment I have some betting chips, the inky drink reappears. There are fewer people playing blackjack, but I don't know how to play, so I opt for the roulette instead. In Year 12, the coolest students had a roulette wheel in the study room, so I know the basics. As I contemplate my next move, the betting discs burn me. Their willingness to be gambled makes my hands sweaty. So I obey their call and push through the crush of men to get closer to where the action is, careful not to spill anyone's drinks as I go. All these guys look as if they can fight, service their cars, and name the 1969 Premiership winning Balmain team. No point irritating them over a spilled drink. Suddenly, on the other side of the roulette table, in amongst this sea of faces bubbling with alcohol, I see someone I know. It's Brainiac, the ginger-haired surfer from the local beach. He looks exactly the same as when I saw him last 7 years ago. Immaturity certainly keeps you young. Sandy! His arms resemble that of a poorly operated marionette as he frantically waves at me. Not wanting to appear unfriendly, it's unusual for a Norfolk boy to acknowledge my presence. I timidly say, "Brainy," and wave back. Holding his inky drink above his head like a tiny hat for a monkey, Brainiac screams, "Don't touch the drinks, Sandy! They put metho in them." Brainiac is unique in surf culture. Not only has he got the outline of his sunglasses burned onto his face, he is the only surfer who doesn't catch any waves. He waits until they're almost breaking on him, then he paddles up the face and lets himself get sucked back down again. People who don't know him think he's insane. That is, until he repeats the procedure 20 times. Brainy raises his voice once again. "Want to come down to me van and have a cone, Sandy?" It's as if everything goes quiet and everyone in the entire Vienna looks at me. Well, that's what it feels like anyway. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about Brainy much longer because a bouncer appears and grabs him and I don't see Brainy again. I hear him screaming, "There's a f***ing magnet under the f***ing table," as he's being removed, but I don't actually see him again. In order to re-establish a comfort zone, I place 5 pink discs on the odd square before the croupier yells, "Last best, please," as if it's one word. The combination of spinning wheel and dancing silver ball mesmerizes me until the croupier breaks the hex by shouting, "2 even." A frenzy of activity follows. Winners grab their spoils, losers watch their chips get removed by the cute miniature rake. Naturally, I'm in the latter group. If you're comfortable losing, stick to what you know. I sip my inky drink and try to act experienced. Brainy's right. Whew, the drink is like paint stripper. When I take a second sip, I instantly feel like a third, and after a third, I feel like betting again, and again, and again. Maybe there is metho in it. I suppose the drunker you get, the more likely you are to squander money. Then suddenly, I hear my name called. I don't respond because I think, oh no, it's Brainy again. But I hear it called a second time, then a third time. It's strange how you recognize your own name, even when there's a lot of noise. I guess it's the same as a mother penguin being able to recognize her baby's call in amongst 1,000 other calls. Self-absorption helps one to survive in a hostile world. I love hearing my name yelled in public, but in this nefarious environment, it's unsettling. Shit, it's the guy I saw with Mrs. Gumley earlier. No, it's not. It's Danny Connors. If I was to name 8 people in the world who I don't want to see right now, Danny Connors would be one of those 8. I've been dreading this moment since Yamba. Is he really the guy I saw at the Gumleys earlier tonight? I can't tell. You get too close to something, you completely lose perspective. Danny has piercing sky blue eyes. This guy has lovely eyes. Danny has lovely long eyelashes. This guy has long eyelashes. Ooh, they're similar all right. He makes his way to where I am. I place another chip on the odd square and stare at the roulette wheel to avoid any unnecessary eye contact. Is he going to beat me up for walking out on him, or what? Hi, I say. Hi, he says. See, Brainiac, I say, as if I'm making light conversation with a regular at a pub. Nah, he says. What about Virginia? Danny's not interested in conversation. He just keeps looking around as if someone's watching him. Having a bet, I say, intentionally dropping the G off my ing words to sound tougher. Blackjack cleaned me out, man. Evil f***ing game, Blackjack, he says. I saw you the other day driving someone in a Mercedes, I say. Danny doesn't respond. He's barely listening. Maybe it wasn't him with Mrs. Gumley. Maybe he doesn't know what I'm talking about. I look around to see what's distracting him, but all I see are more men with leathery faces and roomy eyes. Yup or what? He asked, without appearing to have much interest in the answer. 100 up, I say. Unfortunately, the croupier scrapes my disc off the table, so the wind driving my little white lard drops. Got a car, man? Danny says. What? Got a car. Yes. Do us a favour and give someone a lift? Without waiting for an answer, Danny digs into his pocket and presses a $50 note into my hand. Remember? You owe me, man. His stare sends a chill up my cowardly spine. Then he leaves, his eyes indicating that I should stay put and wait for his return. I watch the roulette wheel spin, trying to work out what's going on, pushing my pants lower to appear tougher in case a physical situation erupts. I watch the silver ball skip across the numbers like a child who's had too much sugar. After about 2 minutes, Danny returns, grabs my arm and tows me towards the door. This is it. I'm being beaten up. The person's at the door, he says. What person? The person I want you to give a lift. Where? At the fucking door. I'm not sure, Danny. Come on, man. You've already taken the money. Suddenly, I see Mrs. Gumley leaning against the wall nearest the door. Sandy, Deborah Gumley. Deborah, Sandy. Danny is the guy who was with Mrs. Gumley. Danny's the blonde driver. Drive Deborah to Pleasant Avenue. Drop her at number 54, man. I've lived next door to the Gumleys for 10 years, and I've never known Mrs. Gumley's first name. You know Pleasant Avenue? Says Danny. Yes, I say. If there's trouble, ring this number, man. And if I don't hear anything, I know everything's cool as shit. I don't tell him that she's my neighbour. Mrs. Gumley doesn't make the connection either. This is the closest I've been to her in 5 years. Something's wrong with her. She's bending back and forth like a green sapling in high wind. Perhaps she doesn't recognize me. Teenagers distend during puberty. She's really out of it, I whisper. Don't take any shit from her, okay? When Danny smiles, you can see the potential Virginia must have seen when they first dated. There's something attractive about him. Danny kisses Mrs. Gumley, not passionately, more of a friendly peck on the lips. They ogle each other. Then Danny returns to the gambling room without a second look. Her arms reach out and grab onto his shirt, but there's no power in her grasp, just need, which Danny breaks with ease. Mrs. Gumley looks at me, links her arm in mine. It feels so frail, like the tail of a seahorse. Her eyes roll back in her head and her tongue pokes in and out like a tomcat being patted at the base of its spine. Let's go, she slurs. On the street outside the casino, there's a wild fight in progress. 2 people wearing dinner suits and a big Polynesian really going at it. It's a vicious fight. Not like the pushing and shoving contests behind the manual block at school. At one point, the Polynesian guy breaks away from the bouncers, runs to a car parked behind mine, flips up the boot and pulls out a shotgun, causing everyone, including us, to duck for cover. The sight of the gun is frightening. You can smell the adrenaline race through the crowd. But then the bouncers are joined by a third man, and they disarm the Polynesian with a pincer movement, hitting him over the head with his own weapon. I hope they move him away from my car. If he stays near the passenger door, we can't leave because the lock on the driver's side is broken, and you can only get into my car from the passenger side. 1:25 a.m. I get Mrs. Gumley into my car and place the seat belt across her frail torso. It feels as if I've caught a lost family pet and I'm about to return it to its owner, confused, hungry, and in need of some tender, loving care. Her hands reach up and grab at me as I lean over her, but she's too weak to hold on. Oh, I love the way she slides her hands down the sides of my ribs though. 1:30 a.m. The green glow of the dashboard makes the drive from the casino to Pleasant Avenue seem spooky. For 2 kilometres, Mrs. Gumley adds to the unsettling atmosphere by saying nothing. She occasionally moves in the seat like a cat getting comfortable on its favourite rug, but she says nothing. She seems intent on keeping her head upright so she won't be sick. As we pass by the beach, I work up the courage to try a sentence. I belong to the beach culture, I say. It's an oddly formal expression, and it doesn't surprise me when she doesn't respond. I hoped it'd lead to a conversation about Danny Connors because Danny's involved in beach culture, but it just leads us back to awkward silence again. My next question is practical. Will Mr. Gumley be home? I'd hate Mr. Gumley to think I'm having an affair with his wife. She giggles like a little girl playing a naughty game. Got a girlfriend? Sandy? She says, her hand suddenly touching my knee and sliding clumsily to the top of my thigh. Not at the moment. You can almost feel these imaginary hands reaching out from inside her eyes. I didn't know you could touch need, but I think I'm touching Mrs. Gumley's need right now. I like you, she purrs. And I like you, Mrs. Gumley. Her hand is resting just below my undie line, thus causing the old floorboards to creak a little. Almost home, I say, like a dad at the end of a long car trip. Suddenly, without warning, Mrs. Gumley opens the passenger door and tries to get out of the car. I instantly stop, oblivious to whether anyone's behind us, and grab her arm. She would have jumped if I hadn't grabbed her. Promise me you won't do that again. I don't want to go home. Why don't you want to go home? I don't like home. What's wrong with home? Don't like home. Promise me you won't open the door again, Mrs. Gumley. She stares at me. It feels like we could start kissing. Without breaking eye contact, she starts removing her dress, as if I've paid her to do it. Please don't take off your dress, Mrs. Gumley. I don't trust me, she slurs, reaching behind her neck to unfasten the zipper. If you've got my dress, I won't run away. The unsettling thing is, there's a logic in what she says. She clumsily pulls down the top of her garment to reveal a lacy black bra. Then she arches her body to slip the dress over her small bottom. Oh, she's so thin. Her ribs are like a cattle grid. If she was to lie down on a country road, no cows would get past her because their hooves would get caught in her ribs. What are you doing, Mrs. Gumley? Mrs. Gumley turns on the interior light. You like? She says. I turn it off. She turns it on again. You like? I'm certainly earning my money here. We finally enter the familiar waters of Pleasant Avenue. I can't stop in front of her place because Mr. Gumley might see us, or worse still, Mr. Price. If he sees Mrs. Gumley in her underwear, he'll pull the Venetians completely out of their frame. I stop at the end of Pleasant Avenue, the part of our street meant to connect with Munro Road, but it never has. By the time I've stopped and reached over to the back seat to retrieve her dress, Mrs. Gumley's out of the vehicle and swaying on the footpath, dressed only in her bra and panties. "Come to my place," she yells. "Shh! You're a snake, Sandy. Put your dress on, Mrs. Gumley. Come in. Put your dress on. Come in. People will see us, Mrs. Gumley. F*** 'em. A dog starts barking, then another and another. "If you put your dress on, I'll come in, Mrs. Gumley." "Promise?" "Yes." Full of confidence, she strides off, but she doesn't stride for long because she loses her balance. "Put the dress on," I whisper. I run back to the car and get it, then follow after her, urging her to put the dress back on, but she's entered Mr. Price's periscope range. If I go up to her, he'll see us, and I'll become part of my own investigation. She stops, almost as if she knows she's within periscope range. "Come on," she purrs. "Come on." The gap between us is bulging with anticipation, curiosity, fear. That's a lot of stuff in one gap. Oh, I'd love to kiss her body all over, then lie back and let her do the same to me. But I can't do that. Off she goes. I scamper over the Gumleys' high sandstone fence and up the steep embankment at the front of their house so I can cut her off at the pass. The driveway is almost vertical. I bet she wishes she wasn't rich and she owned a humble abode and a level block. There are no cars about, which means no one's home, so I could go inside with her. Oh, I'm tempted. She makes it to the top of the driveway on all fours and heads for the veranda. She is like a tired horse from riding school that knows it will get a big bag of oats when it returns to the shed. She stops at a huge terracotta pot on the veranda, bends over it, one hand resting on the rim to stop herself from overbalancing, while the rest of her looks inside the pot. She finds whatever she's looking for, I assume it's a key, and crawls to the door. She struggles to the upright position, and then struggles to insert the key in the lock. I want to help, but the door is in Mr. Price's periscope range. He could sink me in a second. I can't risk all my surveillance for just one survivor. I feel like Jack Hawkins in The Cruel Sea when he has to decide between picking up survivors or risking the safety of his crew because the ASDIC sonar has detected a possible submarine underneath. On the 7th attempt, Mrs. Gumley opens the door and disappears into her blonde brick castle, thus ending a most bizarre episode. I stay in the oleanders. After a few minutes, I realise someone might think I'm an oddbod standing here, so I scurry down the embankment, clutching Mrs. Gumley's black dress like a precious memento from my trip to the unknown. As I walk to my car, I hold it close to my face and smell it. It reeks of Mrs. Gumley, cigarettes, lavender talc, and a missed opportunity.